The team asked me to talk this month about drug and alcohol use at work. So here's a scenario for you. You notice your employee is acting strangely. He just seems off. You immediately think he's on something. What do? Do you confront him and ask if he's high? Do you call the police? Do you send him home and assume that everything will be back to normal tomorrow? Today, we're covering exactly what to do if you suspect an employee is under the influence at work. There are legal protections for employees who struggle with substance abuse, and you don't want to get this wrong. So first things first, how do you even know if someone's under the influence? No one can say with certainty simply by observing behavior that someone is under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Yet observation is the only thing you can go by when making an initial decision when you suspect this is happening. The most important thing to remember is you shouldn't come to any conclusion based on one or two odd things you notice. Let's cover some of the signs you're looking for. Physical signs like slurred speech, red or glassy eyes, and slow reflexes. Behavioral signs like erratic mood swings, confusion, aggression, and difficulty concentrating. Smell? Alcohol or other substances on the breath or clothing. However, you do have to be careful with the scent of marijuana if you are in a state where it is legal. Remember, there are lots of reasons any of those signs could be displayed that have nothing to do with being under the influence. Someone could just be having an off day. Maybe they had a rough night with a teething baby, took a sleeping pill the night before, or just didn't get their morning coffee. That's why it's so important to add context and not make decisions based on someone smelling like weed or just being in a really horrible mood one day. So, what do you do if you notice these signs? Email or call your HR team immediately. We will walk you through each step so you can feel calm and confident in your decisions. These are the steps we will take you through. Step 1 will almost always be to document what you see. Write down the date, time, and behavior you observed. No opinions, just facts. Be specific. Instead of writing, Susan was acting drunk, you'll want to say something like, Susan was swaying while she was talking to me. I noticed she was just looking off to the side like she was zoning out. When I asked her if she was okay, she slurred her words and said she was fine with an L. I asked her to come talk to me in my office and she stumbled in the hallway. When I walked past her to my desk, I noticed a pretty heavy scent of alcohol. Pretty descriptive. Step 2 will usually be to have a private conversation. This is not about you becoming a detective, but it's just asking the employee if everything is okay. It's a fact-finding mission. You might say something like, you don't seem like yourself today. What's going on? It's important to not accuse an employee of being under the influence. Again, no one can say this for sure without a drug test or a breathalyzer. It's fine to tell them what you're observing, and it's important to hear them out with any explanation they have, even if it's not plausible, like they didn't smoke, but they did ride in a car with someone who was smoking weed, so maybe they got a contact high. We will give you talking points for these conversations based on what you have documented. So that conversation might go something like, Susan, you don't seem well today. Is everything okay? And if she says, yep, everything's great, you would then say something like, well, I noticed you were swaying and zoning out. And when I asked you about it, you slurred your words and then you stumbled coming into my office and I kind of smell alcohol on you. And Susan may say that she did drink last night, but she's fine today. And then you have a decision to make. Is she fine today? Is she going to be productive at work? Is her being at work a safety concern? Typically, you will communicate with us again after your conversation so we can talk it through. I can't tell you how important these conversations are with us. We don't know your employees like you do, and that is so important. We can be objective when you can't. When the situations involve a trusted employee, one you feel loyal to, it's critical to have us to remind you of the big picture and the potential impact of your decisions. We will always work with you to support your decisions, even if they aren't exactly what we are recommending, but at the very least, you'll be educated on potential outcomes and can take any calculated risk you feel necessary given the situation. So let me pause there and discuss some legal issues with these situations, especially based on what I just said about calculated risk. Some employers feel very empathetic towards employees who have issues with drugs or alcohol. In the case of Susan, some employers may say, she's just going through a hard time right now. I'm just going to let her sleep it off in her office. I'm in HR, and I always say that I live in the world of worst case scenarios, so you don't have to, and our team takes the same approach. None of us are ever going to recommend that approach of basically doing nothing. We will do our best to support you if you feel strongly about not taking action we propose, but it will never be our recommendation. On the other hand, some employers don't share that philosophy or can't based on workplace safety concerns. So they will follow protocol no matter if the employee is struggling or has been there since the beginning of the company. And that may sound harsh, but that will be our recommendation as well. Consistency is so important, and so is holding employees accountable. It's okay to be empathetic. You don't have to be a jerk about it. But remember that you have to consider your company, your other employees, your customers. There are usually a lot of parties affected by employee behavior. And regardless of your personal stance, it's important to understand that there are protocols to follow to best protect the company, mainly by protecting the employee's legal rights. First, you should have a clear and well-written policy regarding your expectations for a drug-free and alcohol-free workplace. This should cover the steps that will be taken when someone is under the influence and the consequences of a failed drug test. You were actually provided with standard language for this when you signed up with us, unless you haven't approved your handbook yet. So you are covered here. Keep in mind that you generally need the employee's consent to administer a drug test, but that's usually a part of the drug testing facility's process. And failure to submit to a drug test or alcohol test is generally the same as a positive test when it comes to grounds for termination. Be sure to use a medical review officer, an MRO, to confirm any non-negative drug tests before taking adverse employment action. And be very careful about terminating employees for marijuana in jurisdictions where recreational or medicinal use is legal. But don't worry, we will help with that too. All right, back to your employee who is likely under the influence at work. If they admit to being impaired, follow your company policy. And this could mean sending them home, but don't let them drive. Call them a ride share or ask them to call someone to pick them up. Sending them for a drug test, again, you take them. You're not going to let them drive, not only to confirm that they will be safe, but also to prevent them from picking up a sample to use for their test. And you know what I'm talking about. And suspension pending the results of a drug test or investigation. Again, we will walk you through this on a case-by-case basis each and every time you deal with it. If they deny drug or alcohol use, but the signs are there and they are concerning, you can likely still send them for a drug test, and we will guide you here also. In closing, the topic of drugs and alcohol at work is a big one, and I could talk for an hour about different scenarios and even some very entertaining stories regarding excuses that I've heard for positive drug tests. But the takeaways for you today are, number one, have a well-crafted policy regarding drug and alcohol testing and expectations. We've got that one covered for you. Number two, document objective and specific signs of drug or alcohol influence. We will help with that. Number three, work with your Amplified HR team immediately and frequently throughout the process to determine next steps and outcomes. Number four, have a set up process for drug and alcohol testing, suspensions, and terminations. Number five, apply those processes consistently and try to remove emotions entirely from these situations. Honestly, this is exactly why you work with your Amplified HR team, so you don't have to deal with any of this on your own. We've got your back, so you can sleep better at night knowing you are not alone in this stuff.